8. David Fuller. Police in Great Britain finally solved 2 decades-old cold case murders in 2020 when they linked DNA from the murder scenes to a hospital electrician named David Fuller. During the investigation, detectives also found disturbing recordings of Fuller abusing corpses in the mortuary at his workplaces in Kent. They eventually uncovered evidence of the deranged necrophile victimizing more than 100 bodies. In addition to being found guilty of the 2 murders in 2021, Fuller was convicted of 44 charges relating to the remains of 78 people. He was sentenced to life in prison. More recently, he was convicted of additional crimes against 23 more deceased individuals. One of his victims was 24-year-old Azra Kamal, who died in 2020 after falling into a void between 2 roadways. When her mother, Nevrez, learned about what Fuller did to the young woman's body, she began walking to the police station armed with a knife and expecting to come face to face with the perverted old man. Officers stopped Nevrez from taking justice into her own hands and arrested her. She fully admitted that she was 99.9% sure she would have stabbed Fuller in the heart if she'd found him that day. One can only imagine that other victims' families feel a similar hatred toward Fuller, understandably so, and that they would probably inflict a worse punishment on him than the British justice system ever could if given the chance. 7. Will Davis. Staff members at a hospital in Tyler, Texas were baffled when patients began experiencing mysterious complications while recovering from heart surgery in 2017. It happened to at least 11 people over a 7-month period, leaving 6 of them dead. The patients were all in stable condition and were expected to recover when their conditions suddenly worsened. Doctors finally realized what was going on when they looked at CT scans that showed air in the victims' brains. The most likely explanation for how it happened was by someone deliberately injecting oxygen into the patient's arterial lines. Surveillance footage showed a nurse named Will Davis exiting rooms just minutes before the complications began. In one incident, he stood at his station doing nothing while an alarm went off in the room of a patient he'd just treated. A search of his computer later revealed that he'd researched the effects of injecting air into a patient's line well in advance of his crimes. In early 2018, Davis was charged with capital murder. His lawyer argued that his client was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time and that the evidence didn't necessarily point to foul play. A small piece of the truth finally came out in a jailhouse phone call David made to his ex-wife after he was convicted of the charges. His ex wanted the truth, and he said that he may have prolonged patients' illnesses so he would continue getting enough overtime to pay the bills. Prosecutors rejected the explanation and stuck to their belief that Davis was a cold, calculating sociopath who killed for fun, which is probably true, but it was the first time he admitted to any wrongdoing whatsoever. He's currently appealing his case from death row. 6. John Leonard Orr. John Leonard Orr was a highly respected arson investigator for Glendale Fire Department in Southern California. He was also a serial arsonist who set as many as 2,000 fires in the Los Angeles area between 1984 and 1991. One of Orr's earliest fires tore through a hardware store in less than 5 minutes, leaving 4 people dead. Of course, nobody suspected that he was the culprit. Over the years, authorities began to suspect Orr of being the arsonist and put him under surveillance. They tied him to the scene of several fires and arrested him in 1991. During a search of Orr's house, investigators found a 350-page manuscript about an arsonist who burned down buildings in the same area and under the same circumstances as many real-life fires that had occurred in recent years, including the one that killed 4 people. It read like a confession and served as an extremely helpful guide for uncovering Orr's extensive crimes. Orr defended the manuscript as a work of fiction based on the investigations he'd led, but the parallels were impossible to ignore and the evidence against him continued to stack up. By the time he went to trial in state court for 4 counts of murder in connection with the 1984 fire, he was already serving time in federal prison for 6 counts of arson. He was found guilty of all 4 murders, plus 20 additional counts of arson, and was sentenced to life in prison. 5. Chuck Boruto. 26-year-old paralegal Julia Law began dating prominent attorney Chuck Boruto in 2013 after landing a job at his Philadelphia law office. Just 2 months later, a maintenance worker found the young woman face down in the bathtub at Peru's luxury condo. The tragedy immediately sparked suspicion and rumors about Boruto, who famously defended some of Philly's most notorious mobsters and other criminals. He told police that he was checking on the construction of his new home in New Jersey at the time of Julia's death. Toxicology results revealed that her blood alcohol level was 0.4, 5 times the legal limit, and police ultimately concluded that she likely drowned during a seizure. Boruto was cleared of any criminal suspicion, but the incident nevertheless continued to follow him around, overshadowing his impressive career accomplishments and exceptional law skills. He finally spoke out about Julia's death on his campaign website when he ran for district attorney in 2021. In a section of the site dedicated specifically to the matter, Boruto clarified how he cooperated with law enforcement, proved his whereabouts, and readily submitted his phone to be searched. He did whatever was necessary to clear his name, and it's obvious by his tone that he was getting frustrated with his inability to escape suspicion in the public eye. According to Boruto, so many alcohol bottles were found at the scene of Julia's death that it looked like there had been a party in his condo. But only she was seen coming and going during the time frame in which the alcohol was consumed. He also said that Julia had other boyfriends, and that if she died at one of their houses, the case would have never received the amount of publicity. Boruto lost his bid for DA, and it most likely had to do with his conservative beliefs in a heavily left-leaning city than anything else. But his seemingly insensitive commentary about the girl in my bathtub, as he put it, probably didn't help his cause. 4. Mehmet Kaya. One customer died, and more than 30 others fell seriously ill in 2012 after eating a holiday meal at the Railway Hotel in Essex, England. 46-year-old Della Gallagher's husband John both got sick with uncontrollable vomiting and diarrhea the morning after dining at the pub. Della's symptoms were much worse, but John was too sick to accompany her to the hospital when she was picked up by an ambulance. She was sent home from the hospital, and it wasn't long before her condition worsened. John later described how Delia began to shake as her eyes rolled into the back of her head. His wife died the next morning. As it turned out, Della and the other diners who got sick were suffering from a type of food poisoning called Clostridium perfringens. They'd gotten it from eating reheated turkey, which had been put in the fridge while it was still hot from the first time it was cooked, creating a perfect breeding ground for the bacteria. Investigators discovered that the restaurant chef Mehmet Kaya and its general manager Anne-Marie McSweeney disposed of the food and falsified the business's records in an attempt to evade accountability for the mass poisoning. McSweeney was jailed for 18 months for perverting the course of justice, while Kaya received a 1-year sentence, and the company that owns the restaurant was slapped with a £1.5 million fine. 3. Stephen Glass. In the late 90s, a young journalist named Stephen Glass skyrocketed to the upper ranks of the industry, catching the attention of the New York Times, Rolling Stone, and other big-name publications that most young writers only dream of working for. During that same period, Glass also peppered his articles with lies and wrote completely fabricated pieces about people and companies that don't exist and events that never happened. The young reporter was undoubtedly a gifted writer. He spun his bogus narratives so convincingly that when respected organizations like the Center for Science in the Public Interest and Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE, began calling him out, his employers defended him and even demanded an apology on one occasion. But Glass's fellow journalists eventually began to question his credibility when they tried fact-checking his work and struggled to corroborate his claims. One article talked about a teen hacker who broke into a company's security network and impressed its executives so much with his skills that he landed a job as a consultant. The piece mentioned a company called Uked Micronics, but the only evidence of its existence was a sloppily built website. At the time, Glass was writing for the New Republic. He gave his lead editor, Charles Lane, a phone number for a Uked Micronics executive. The number actually belonged to Glass's brother, who tried but failed to convincingly play the role of an executive. Lane fired Glass, and it was subsequently discovered that he partially or entirely fabricated at least 40 articles over a 2.5-year period. After being kicked out of the world of journalism, he attempted to become a lawyer, but was denied due to concerns regarding his ability to be honest. Glass has worked as a paralegal since 2004, and he paid back over $200,000 to the publications he scammed. But he'll always remain a disgraced figure in the big leagues of journalism. 2. Ronaldo Rivera Ortiz. Between May and August of 2022, at least 12 otherwise healthy people experienced unexplained heart complications during routine surgeries and procedures at a surgical center in Dallas, Texas. One of the individuals, a doctor who worked at the center, died after using an IV bag of saline to treat herself for dehydration. A toxicology test revealed that she had a fatal dose of a nerve-blocking drug called bupivacaine in her system, leading staff members to believe that someone was poisoning the center's IV bags. After examining surveillance footage and other evidence, investigators zeroed in on 59-year-old anesthesiologist Ronaldo Rivera Ortiz Jr., who was allegedly seen acting suspiciously with IV bags by employees and on camera. In one clip, he could be seen slipping an IV bag into its designated storage place and then scanning the hallway as if to check for anyone who might be watching him. Another video appeared to show the doctor swapping one IV bag out for another, which ended up being used on a patient who experienced complications. Bupivacaine can cause someone's heart to stop, and federal prosecutors reasoned that a person wouldn't put it in an IV bag unless they intended to harm someone with it. None of the victims were under Ortiz's care. By then, he'd already lost his privileges at another medical center for his mishandling of an emergency that happened to be one of his patients. Ortiz also has a questionable history of criminal behavior, including shooting his neighbor's dog and being violent toward women. Not exactly the kind of person you'd normally trust to have people's lives in his hands as part of his daily job. Luckily, the man prosecutors have dubbed a medical terrorist will probably never practice medicine again. He lost his license in 2022 and was federally charged with 5 counts of tampering with consumer products and 5 counts of adulteration of a drug. A judge ordered Ortiz held without bail, citing concerns that he might seek retaliation against people involved in the investigation if given a chance. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. 1. Shelby Riggs Hopkins. Officers from the Orlando Police Department were tasked with keeping an eye on a local 7-Eleven in 2018 after receiving complaints about drug activity at the store. During her shift one day, Corporal Shelby Riggs Hopkins spotted what she believed was a suspicious vehicle and pulled the car over after observing a traffic violation. The driver, a 65-year-old retired city worker named Daniel Rushing, was actually at the 7-Eleven to see if his friend who worked there needed a ride home. During the stop, Riggs Hopkins observed a chunky white powder on the car's floorboard, which she initially suspected was cocaine. Rushing told her that it was glaze from a donut, and a test of the substance turned up negative for cocaine. But the cop ran 2 more tests, and the results gave her the impression that the powder was methamphetamine. Riggs Hopkins arrested Rushing, who continued to insist that there were no drugs in his car. His innocence was proven after the powder was sent off to the lab and determined not to be an illegal substance. By then, a sergeant within the department had also run a test on the sample and discovered that it was not a drug. An internal investigation found that Riggs Hopkins had used the department's drug testing kits improperly. She blamed this on a lack of training and received a written reprimand for the mistake. The inquiry found that many of the agency's officers were untrained on proper use of the kits, and corrective action was taken. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be court-ordered to pay back a former employer for a mistake you made that ended up costing them $10,000, or be fired from a well-paying job that you love based on false allegations, but suffer no serious damage to your pocketbook or legal record? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.